Sure, it's Staff Sergeant Harry Grewal, Harrygrewl. I'm Staff Sergeant in charge of Sexual Assault Section in the Serious Crimes Branch at the Edmonton Police Service.
Do you want us to start asking questions?
I can give you a little brief outline. So in January this year, in our West Division beat members initiated an investigation into sexual assaults against women experiencing homelessness. It was reported to police that a man was approaching women in and around the emergency shelters, befriending them. He was then taking them back to his house where he would confine them and only let them go after the sexual assaults being committed. In May, the Sexual Assault Section took over this investigation and identified Donald Burnett, his 60-year-old white male, 5'7" in height, blue eyes, brown hair, and heavy build. He was arrested and charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 2 counts of forcible confinement. The local shelters were warned in February while the investigation was ongoing, reaching up to the point of arrest, advising them of what's been going on and what he has done so that we could safeguard more survivors out there. He's also known to go by the name of Don or Donald Davidson. And we've learned that he often tells the vulnerable females that not to go to the police as they will not take their complaints seriously. As such, we're here today to put this message out there that we want all the survivors to come forward and provide us the complaint and give us the details so that it'll be investigated thoroughly and we can put the right charges appropriate to the Crown.
Sounds like the first incident happened in July 2015.
Correct.
How did you first learn about these incidents?
So you're right, the first incident was 2015, and we did not become aware of this till January this year, and that's all kudos to our West Division beat members who spoke to the vulnerable females out in the community, gained their trust, and built a relationship for them to be able to feel comfortable and come forward and actually lodge the formal complaint. That also then led to the second female who was assaulted as recent as December of 2022. It was, like I said before, it was the belief that they had about police not taking them seriously, that they did not come forward, but the West Division members and their excellent work in sort of assimilating themselves in the community and forming a relationship allowed this investigation to commence.
Hi, Natasha.
Hi.
Sorry, it's a bit late. Can you elaborate on, you said they were hesitant to go to police. Can you explain with the victim what happened? She finally came forward, made a formal statement. How did that happen?
My understanding is that after the Beats members started speaking with the complainant about their general day-to-day activities and stuff and formed a relation of trust, that they opened up about the sexual assault that took place on them.
I'm still a bit confused if this incident occurred in 2015. I guess we're all wondering why it took 8 years.
Again, it depends upon the person coming forward to us and lodging a formal complaint. And that's the only way we became involved in this investigation. Without that, we had no information of what this person was doing.
The charges were laid, though, in March. Why now come forward?
The charge was actually laid in May of this year. He was in custody until 17th of July. And it's after that, once we found out that he's been released with conditions, investigative team came together to find out so that we can make an investigative decision as to how this will affect our investigation, but keeping the public safety and especially the vulnerable population safety in mind, together with consultation with our legal advice section, we're coming forward with this media release.
Does the vulnerability of the victims have an impact on this investigation and the way it's proceeding?
That often plays a part in an investigation where, again, as I've said before about building the trust, police have come leaps and bounds, Edmonton Police Service especially, in building the community relationship. And I have, as a staff sergeant, seen many of those files come forward. And as such, yes, that gap is now being reduced.
How was he, I guess, getting the women to his
home? He himself visits shelters quite a bit and uses their services even though he has a house, and that's where he would befriend vulnerable females who are, of course, that is their place of safety. The shelters is a place where they feel safe. Befriend them and take them back home, and do the sexual assaults.
He's now been released, as you
Correct.
mentioned. Is there concern that him being released is going to make it more challenging to bring more victims forward potentially? Concern that he's back out on the streets?
Difficult to say on that. All I would say is that I just want the message to go across to all the survivors out there. The police is out. Police is here to help you navigate through this difficult time. And our main concern is their health and safety, and be able to put them in touch with the social services out there and the trauma services out there, so they can help them and give them the right support that they need after this traumatic experience, which will then hopefully lead for them to open up and come forward and give us the complaint.
When did police warn the shelters?
It was in February of this year,
Okay, so just before the charges.
3 months before the charges, yes.
Okay.
You're looking for more potential victims. Is there a reason there's not a photo going on with this?
That's an investigative aid, and that's the reason we don't want to release the photograph at this moment, as it will affect our investigation.
Then are we to take it that the vulnerable would know who this person is? If you want people to come forward, they need to know who you're talking about.
Correct. Speaking with the shelter staff, he is a known person to that population, so his name and description should allow people, especially the survivors of the sexual assault, to come forward and know what we are talking about.
Does he have a prior history of crime?
He's known to EPS and our surrounding police agencies.
We've seen in the past people out on bail reoffend. What's to stop, or what's to keep people safe from him doing this again?
Well, EPS has a warrant apprehension unit, first of all, who check on bail conditions. Of course, we are unable to check every single person's bail condition. However, it's, like I said, judiciary has its own checks and balances in place to be able to hold a person or not. I can only believe that the curfew conditions, as well as the conditions of not visiting these locations, will hopefully be followed, and if not, we'll be there to ensure the breach charges are laid.
Do you have any idea how many more victims there could be?
It's impossible for me to say that. However, I would like to point out that the first offense took place 2015. Second took place in 2022. We have a 7 years gap in between. So based on that, my team and I firmly believe there are more victims and survivors out there who are victim of sexual assault.
Are you actively investigating specific cases?
We're looking for the survivors to come forward, and that's why we're making contacts with the shelters to speak to the support staff to see if somebody comes forward through that.
You mentioned that he had a home. I don't know if it was a single-family house or some sort of other residence, but he was using the services of some of these agencies. Is it your belief that he was fraudulently representing himself to sort of gain access, or was he genuinely in need of some services? Can you characterize that at all?
I can't answer that in detail at this time, sorry.
Can you say if he had a single family residence?
He does have a residence. Yeah.
Do you live by himself?
He has family, but he does live by himself.
Do you know how long he was using kind of the shelter system, as you mentioned?
I don't have the exact dates for that.
And again, I'm sorry if I missed this in the beginning, but how did you first get alerted to this?
So our West Division beat members in January started to communicate with our two survivors, the two complainants, and through communication and through building a relationship of trust with them, they found out of the assaults that took place on them.
What spurred that communication to begin with?
That's the beat members' job, to be able to go out there and speak to the members of the community and learn who's in their community and what kind of challenges people are facing, so that we can, we can identify and rectify those problems.
Besides notifying the shelters, is there anything actively being done to stop this from happening again?
Again, like I said just now, our beat members all around the city. This is just the West Division beat members example, but beat members are all across the city. They are out there speaking to the community, speaking to the members of this community specifically, and building trust and finding out the issues that they are facing, as well as we have the help unit and many other units like that, which are out there not only trying to assist these members of the community, but also trying to find out how they can be helped and for them to come forward if a crime has been occurred on them.
Given the nature of the assaults, do you have concerns that there could be other victims outside of this vulnerable community?
Quite possible. And that's the reason we are not, I cannot answer that. They can only be from that. However, the two complaints that we have, that relates particularly to the shelters.
But given the period of time between
Mhm.
his first known assault and his subsequent arrest, would you characterize that behavior of his as predatory on that community?
It's definitely predatory. There's no other way of putting it, where a person picks a vulnerable person who already is in need of help from many agencies in our city and preys on them by giving them false hope and taking them home where he sexually assaults them. So yes, I think that's a definition of a predator.
Given the fact that his potential victims could be from outside of that community, and you mentioned that he may well be known within the shelter community, still not having a photo of the accused
Mhm.
in the public doesn't really allow for people outside of that community.
Mhm.
Obviously, his name could be, he could use an alias, he could use whatever, but the name doesn't mean much.
Again, it's one of the investigative aids that cannot be disclosed at this point in time, specifically at this point where we are looking for more complainants to come forward. For us to be able to investigate properly and use that evidence in court, there are certain limitations that we have, and that's one of those limitations we're holding on to for not releasing the photograph.
You mentioned he's not allowed to be in and around 3 shelters in the city specifically, that's what it said in the release. What are you telling those shelters in terms of, you know, what's the communication been like with these shelters, and what are you telling them now?
The shelters are fully aware of the charges that are being laid against this person, the crime that he has committed, and they've been advised to be able to speak to their the members who use the support from them to be able to find out if they are victims of any kind of crime by this person or by anyone else, and to be able to come forward to us for that.
Why limit it to the 3 shelters?
Those were the 3 shelters known to us at the time where he has committed the crime from, and as such, those are the ones we are, for curfew conditions, those shelters. However, for release, every shelter is aware of it.
What about the numerous tent camps? You said his residence was in the West End, and there's certainly tent camps in the
Mhm.
West End and other places in the city. Are any of those sites being looked at as possible places where he would have found a victim?
Not directly looked at in that manner. However, speaking with the shelter staff, yes, they do live in the tents, but they use the services from within the shelter. So that's where we are hoping that the connection will be made through that.
Are there any social service agencies in the West End? I think the ones you mentioned were mostly downtown, were they not?
Correct. They're mostly downtown. I'm not aware of any social agencies in West End that's been approached directly, but that's something my investigators, and I can definitely check and get back to you.
Sorry, I had a question. I'm just confused. So you're not passing around the photo, but are you passing around the photo to the homeless shelters, which are like the 3 main ones?
Homeless shelters are aware of who he is, and they have him in their system as well.